There are places in this world that are older than memory, places where the past isn't just a collection of stories, but a living, breathing presence that clings to the air like the humidity of a monsoon night. Old Dhaka is one such place. Its labyrinthine alleys, the famous golas, are veins carrying the lifeblood of history, commerce, and secrets. But for every story of life and laughter that echoes off its ancient brickwork, there is another, darker tale that is only whispered when the sun goes down. This story is not one I read in a book. It was told to me by a man named Kamal, his voice still trembling with a fear that years had not managed to erase. It's a story about a ride home, a journey that should have taken 20 minutes, but has instead lasted a lifetime in his nightmares. This is the story of his last fare, and the whispering rickshaw of Old Dhaka. Kamal was a creature of logic, a software developer in his late 20s. He had moved to Dhaka for its energy, its opportunity, its relentless forward momentum. He saw the city as a complex algorithm, a system of inputs and outputs that, once understood, could be navigated with ease. He had little time for the superstitions that his grandmother used to whisper about, tales of jinn and the banyan trees and spirits that haunted the riverbanks. To him, they were just programming bugs in the human psyche, relics of a less enlightened time. His modern apartment in a newer part of the city was his sanctuary, a clean, air-conditioned space far removed from the chaotic charm of the old city. But his work often took him there, to a client's office nestled deep within the maze of Natsira Bazaar. On this particular Tuesday, he had stayed late, wrestling with a stubborn piece of code until the digital clock on his screen glowed 11:47 p.m. He wasn't worried. His trusty motorbike was his key to this city, a nimble machine that could weave through traffic and navigate the tittest of alleys. The night was thick and humid, the air heavy with the promise of rain. The usual cacophony of Old Dhaka had subsided to a low, sleepy murmur. The scent of fried pia and stale jasmine garlands hung in the air. He was just a few blocks from the main road when it happened. A sudden, violent sputter, a metallic cough, and then silence. The engine died. Kamal coasted to a stop under the dim, yellow glow of a solitary street lamp. Cursing under his breath, he tried the ignition again. Nothing. He was a man of code, not of carburetors. He was stranded. His first instinct was to pull out his phone. The screen flared to life, revealing the dreaded icon. 7% battery. Just enough for a quick call. But who? His friends lived across the city. A ride-sharing app would never find him here in this nameless artery of the old town. A wave of frustration washed over him, followed by a prickle of unease. The street, which had seemed merely quiet before, now felt unnervingly empty. The shutters on the storefronts were pulled down like closed eyelids. The shadows in the alleyways seemed deeper, darker. Then he felt it, a sensation that defied his logical mind. The feeling of being watched. He scanned the street, the shuttered windows, the dark mouths of the goalless branching off the main path. He saw nothing. He told himself it was just paranoia, his mind playing tricks on him in the unfamiliar silence. A fat drop of water hit his forehead, then another. The promised rain had arrived. Within seconds, a drizzle turned into a downpour, a torrential monsoon shower that hammered against the corrugated tin roofs and turned the dusty street into a slick, muddy river. Kamal scrambled for cover, pressing himself under the narrow awning of a closed spice shop. The water cascaded down in a thick curtain, trapping him. It was through this wall of rain that he saw it, emerging from a gully so narrow he hadn't even noticed it before. A rickshaw glided into the light. It didn't rattle or jingle. It moved with a ghostly silence, the only sound, the soft hiss of its wheels on the wet asphalt. It was an old-world rickshaw, the kind you rarely see anymore. The painted images of film stars and peacocks on its back panel were faded and peeling. Its skeletal frame was a dark silhouette against the rain. At its helm was a man, or the shape of a man. He was impossibly thin, his limbs like sticks. A worn gammar was wrapped around his head, concealing most of his face in shadow. Desperation warred with a sudden, inexplicable dread. This was his way out. It had to be. Logic dictated it. Kamal stepped out from under the awning, waving his arm. "Hey, buy a ride," he shouted over the roar of the rain. The rickshaw slowed and stopped directly in front of him. The puller didn't speak. He simply turned his head slightly, a dark shape in the gloom, and gave a single, slow nod. Kamal felt a flicker of hesitation. Something was wrong. The silence of the man, the unnatural quiet of the rickshaw itself. It was unsettling, but the rain was cold, his phone was dying, and home was miles away. Golson, Kamal said, naming his neighborhood. He expected a negotiation, a haggling over the price. It was the way of things. Instead, the man just nodded again, a gesture that was both an acceptance and a command. Swallowing his unease, Kamal climbed in. The vinyl seat was cold and slick, and a musty smell, like damp earth and rotting cloth, filled the small space. With a push, they were moving. The journey had begun. At first, the only sounds were the drumming of the rain on the canopy and the rhythmic slosh of the wheels through the flooded street. But then, a new sound began to surface. A faint, rhythmic creak from the axle. Kamal had ridden hundreds of rickshaws. He knew their mechanical symphony well. But this sound was different. It had a strange, guttural quality. It sounded less like metal on metal and more like a whisper, a low, raspy sound, as if someone were continuously sighing a long, drawn-out word. Chic, SSA. He tried to ignore it, focusing on the route. They should have been heading towards the main road, towards the wider, better-lit avenues that would lead him out of this ancient maze. But the puller took a sharp left, plunging them into another dark gully, even narrower than the last. "Hey, bye," Kamal called out, his voice tight. "This isn't the way to go. You need to get on the main road." The figure in front of him didn't respond. He didn't even seem to hear. His back remained a rigid, straight line as he pedaled with a steady, unhurried pace. The walls of the alley closed in around them, so close Kamal could have reached out and touched the crumbling brick on either side. The buildings blotted out the sky, and the dim city glow was replaced by an oppressive darkness. The air grew colder, and the smells changed. The scent of rain and wet asphalt was overpowered by the cloying sweetness of night-blooming jasmine mixed with the foul stench of decay. The whispering creak of the axle grew louder, more insistent. Kamal was certain now. It wasn't just a mechanical sound. Woven into it, like a hidden thread, was a voice. He couldn't decipher the words, but he could feel them. They were filled with a profound and ancient sorrow. "Are you saying something?" Kamal asked, his voice louder this time, betraying his rising panic. "I can't hear you over the rain." The rickshaw puller pedaled on, his silence more terrifying than any answer could have been. Kamal's heart began to hammer against his ribs. His logical mind was screaming at him, searching for a rational explanation. The wind, the strange acoustics of the alley. Was the old man muttering to himself? His words distorted by the storm? He needed to see where he was. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy with fear. The screen flickered to life, its cold blue light a stark contrast to the yellow gloom. 3% battery. He opened the map application, but the words, "No GPS signal," glowed mockingly back at him. But the phone's light did something else. It illuminated the small world of the rickshaw's cabin. He saw the faded, once plush velvet of the seat was covered in dark, rust-colored stains. The floorboards were bare and splintered. He instinctively aimed the light forward, towards the puller's back. What he saw made the breath catch in his throat. The man's Punjabi, his tunic, was not just old, it was threadbare and frayed, with holes that revealed the skin beneath. And that skin, Kamal's mind it was grey and mottled, stretched so tightly over the man's vertebrae that he could count each one. It looked like ancient parchment, brittle and dry. At that moment, the whispers changed. They coalesced. They were no longer a vague, sorrowful murmur. They became a chorus of voices, faint and layered, all speaking in unison. They spoke to clear words in Bengali, a phrase that slid like ice into Kamal's soul. They whispered, "Nemo nut, don't get off." Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. This wasn't a ride. It was a trap. "Stop!" he screamed, his voice raw with terror. "Stop the rickshaw. I want to get off. Now." He lunged forward, grabbing the puller's shoulder. The flesh beneath the rotting cloth was hard and cold, like stone. The man didn't flinch. He just kept pedaling, his pace as steady and relentless as a funeral drum. Kamal scrambled backwards, pressing himself into the corner of the seat, his mind a maelstrom of disbelief and horror. The rickshaw made one final, sharp turn and came to a dead stop. The sudden silence was more shocking than the noise. The rain had even softened to a quiet drizzle. They were at the end of a blind alley, facing a structure that didn't belong. It was a colossal, derelict mansion, a relic of the colonial era. Its white plaster was blackened with grime, and massive banyan tree roots crawled over its facade like petrified snakes, prying the bricks apart. The iron gates, rusted and ornate, hung open like a gaping mouth, revealing a courtyard choked with weeds. The puller stopped pedaling. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, with an unnatural smoothness, the man's head began to turn. It turned past his shoulder, past the point of any human flexibility. Kamal heard a sickening series of cracks and pops, like wet wood being snapped. The head kept turning, past 90 degrees, past 120, the neck twisting like a rope. It didn't stop until it had rotated a full 180 degrees, facing Kamal directly over the man's own back. Kamal saw the face, and he understood. There were no eyes in the sunken soul, only milky white orbs that seemed to glow with a faint, phosphorescent light. The skin was stretched taut over a skull, thin and grey, like a death mask. The lips were gone, pulled back in a lipless grimace to reveal yellowed, uneven teeth. From that horrifying mouth, a voice emerged. It was a sound of dust and graves. The dry rasp of the whispers and the creaking wheel made flesh. It was the voice of the puller and the chorus of his victims, all speaking as one. It rasped, "We have arrived. The fare is due." Primal, unthinking, terror took over. Kamal didn't have a plan. He didn't have a thought. His body acted on its own. With a strangled scream, he grabbed his wallet from his back pocket, not even looking at it, and hurled it at the monstrous figure. As the wallet sailed through the air, he threw himself sideways out of the rickshaw, landing hard on the slick, muddy cobblestones. He scrambled to his feet, his limbs flailing, and he ran. He ran without looking back, his lungs burning, his feet slipping in the mud. Behind him, he heard a sound that would haunt him forever, a dry, rattling laughter that echoed through the narrow alley, a sound of pure malice that mixed with the gentle patter of the rain. He ran through the suffocating maze, taking random turns, driven by nothing but the adrenaline of a hunted animal. He didn't know how long he ran. It could have been minutes or an hour. Suddenly, he burst out of an alleyway and collapsed onto the pavement of a wide, familiar street, the blessed light of modern street lamps washing over him. He lay there, gasping for air, drenched in rain and sweat, shaking uncontrollably. After a few minutes, he pushed himself up and looked back. He searched for the mouth of the alley he had just escaped from. There was nothing there, only the solid, windowless brick wall of an old warehouse. There was no alley, no mansion, no rickshaw. It was simply gone. The next morning, shivering with a fever he couldn't shake, Kamal told his story to his building's old Dhawan, the caretaker, a man with a face as wrinkled as a map of the city he'd lived in for 70 years. The old man listened patiently, his expression growing more and more grave as Kamal spoke. When Kamal finished, Fadaran took a long drag from his cigarette and looked out towards the hazy skyline. "You are a lucky boy, Kamal Babu," he said, his voice low. "Very lucky. You met Hashim." He told Kamal the story, a local legend, a ghost story told to frighten children, but one that the old-timers knew was true. 100 years ago, a poor rickshaw puller named Hashim worked these streets. He was known for taking any fare, at any hour, to support his sick daughter. One stormy night, like this one, he picked up a passenger who asked to be taken to the old landlord's mansion at the end of the blind alley. When they arrived, the passenger, instead of paying the fare, murdered Hashim with a knife and stole his meager earnings, burying his body somewhere on the mansion's cursed grounds. They say his ghost, his boot, still searches for that last passenger. The old man continued, his eyes dark with ancient knowledge. He roams the forgotten alleys on nights the sky weeps, offering a ride. The whispers you heard, they are the souls of the others, the ones who rode with him and didn't have a fare to offer. The Dhawan looked at Kamal. When he asks for the fare, he isn't asking for money, he is asking for your life, to pay his debt. By throwing your wallet, you paid a fare, you completed the ritual. It was enough to let you go. You were lucky. Kamal never went back to Old Dhaka after dark. He quit his job and found a new one closer to home. His logical, orderly world had been shattered, replaced by the terrifying knowledge that some things can't be explained by code or reason. He is a man haunted, not by a ghost, but by a memory. The memory of a creaking wheel, of milky white eyes, and of a dry, dusty voice demanding a fare that he almost paid with his soul.